to the inaugural session of Symposium on the theme Law, Language and Literature, Exploring Words and Worlds. We are grateful to Re-Markings and Professor Nibir Ghosh for associating with us for this event. We are thankful for the distinguished speakers, Professor Nibir Ghosh and Professor Prasannanshu, for accepting our invitation. We also acknowledge the presence of Ms. Chanima Wijebandara, Judicial Officer from Sri Lanka. I welcome everyone, the guests, the resource persons, faculty members, and everyone who has joined us today. The Department of English has been organizing an array of events for skill enhancement of students. These range from essay writing competitions, debates, to discussion forums. This year, the department ventures into a pertinent discussion on the topic Law, Language and Literature. We are grateful to Honorable Vice-Chancellor Professor G.S. and Registrar for joining us today. Today, we have with us two eminent speakers, and it is my pleasant duty to introduce the two eminent speakers. Dr. Nibir Ghosh is a UGC Emeritus Professor in the Department of English Studies and Research in Agra College, Agra, India. He was a Senior Fulbright Fellow 2003-4 at the University of Washington, Seattle, USA. He is the author of widely acclaimed books, Beyond Boundaries, Multicultural America and Conversations with Contemporary Authors, and Calculus of Powers. He is the Chief Editor and in the Journal of Research in English. Professor Prasannanshu is currently the Director of Center for Linguistic Justice and Endangered Languages, NLU Delhi. He is the recipient of the prestigious Erasmus Mundus Scholarship of the European Union. He has been a visiting fellow of the British Academy, UK, fellow of the Institute for Advanced Studies in Humanities, UK. He has chaired 2 sessions in the 35th Annual and First International Conference of the Linguistic Society of India, organized by the Central Institute of Indian Languages, Mysore, and the Linguistic Society of India, Pune. Our who would be joining the symposium, which is dated 9th October, has also joined us today as a panelist, Ms. Chanima Wijebandara. She is a magistrate and judicial officer in Sri Lanka. She has completed her LLM in Criminal Justice Administration, and she has a diploma in forensic medicine. On behalf of the organizing committee, I would now request Honorable Vice-Chancellor, sir, to address the audience.
Very good morning to all present, and it is my pleasure to welcome distinguished speakers, panelists, students, and faculty. Professor Prasannanshu, Professor of English from NLU Delhi, I extend heartiest welcome to you for joining today to this very important symposium on law, language, and literature, exploring words and worlds. This very important theme, and nothing could have been more fitting person to address this gathering than my very dear friend and colleague, Professor Prasannanshu. And I also take this opportunity to welcome Dr. Nibir Ghosh, who's a UGC Emeritus Professor, and guests from other institutions and organizations who are joining today. And as I can gather that this subject is gaining currency within the law school setup for want of various reasons. One reason being that the students are getting inclined to read a variety of stuff around the world, and they are trying to explore the linkages of literary material with that of legal writings. So therefore, you have rightly, projected 4 themes for your discussion today, focusing on language and literary text, language of law, literature and judgments, language, culture, and literature. I really, I'm not an expert of this particular field, but as I understand, because of my association with Professor Prasannanshu and my all discussions that I had during my tenure in NLU Delhi, I find that there is a fascinating, connect between law and literature. And when I recall very clearly, uh, a couple of months back, I, you know, read a piece by Justice A P Shah, who is a former, Chief Justice of Delhi High Court, and a very, you know, who is a person who is very inclined to look at, he's a man from literature and also a judge and every, so he has written a piece in the Hindu of months ago. And I vividly recall that he was mentioning, and that how I turned to look at this particular issue. He said that there are many literary works that deal with law as a subject, and he has very elaborately mentioned the Pickwick Papers, the novel by Charles Dickens, and therefore I tried to look at what was there in that novel, and he rightly said, and he also mentioned the work of Lord Denning, Krishna Iyer, Oliver Wendell, and and then he went on, exploring this fascinating relation. And in the process, I found that there are three facets of this discussion where we look at law in the literature, how the legal doctrines are finding place in the contemporary literary writing. That is one. Second, we also look at law as literature because every creation are creative writing. And third, law as literature. So I think a lot of discussion revolves around, but I think a lot of credit is given to the writings of, Walter Scott, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, Kafka. And Justice A P Shah mentioned that if especially those who were trained in law also, and there were very good writers like Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay, who also wrote Vande Mataram, among many other works. And he was basically a deputy magistrate, and also P.L. Deshpande, several people, a Marathi writer. And then probably this question, especially when literature and language, which is now a very important subject in the law school. Therefore, a lot of people are now turning to look at the connection between the law and literature. And this obvious interconnection is now becoming more and more, explicit because of the study. And I only recall in Indian context some, very literary judges, like I think some of you must be knowing about Justice Vivian Bose. He used to write in various judgment. I remember his BD Supply Company versus the Union of India. This was a very complex text matter. And he wrote, after all, for whose benefit was the Constitution, enacted? What was the, point of making all this pother about fundamental rights? He said, I'm clear that the Constitution is not for the exclusive benefit of governments and state, and so on. And he has made a very literary appeal kind of, gesture and writings. And I think we all, owe a lot to what brilliant, expressions that Justice V.R. Krishna Iyer. And in Justice Krishna Iyer, in Maruram judgment, we all study law, and he wrote certain lines which not only had a very strong legal appeal, but the fascinating construction that he could develop in those lines was, amazing. He wrote that a procession of life convicts, because this was related to the matter of under trial. So he is using the expression, a procession of life convicts, well over 2,000 strong, with more joining, the march, even as the arguments were on, has vicariously mobbed this court through the learned council. Means they were not present, but through the learned council, carrying constitutional missiles in hand. and demanding liberty beyond the bars. And they challenge the wires of 433A of the Criminal Procedure Code, which compels casing of two classes of prisoner, at least for 14 eternal infernal years, regardless of what of the benign remissions and compassionate concessions sanctioned by prison law and human justice. And he also quoted, in that judgment, Oscar Wilde, and Oscar says that I know not whether laws be right or whether laws be wrong. All that we know who lie in gold is that the wall is strong and that each day is like a year whose days are long. And he also says, but broken hearts cannot break prison's walls, since prisons are built with the stones of wall. So I suppose that there is a huge to explore, and especially I think on some other occasion I was guiding a student into some kind of work where I happened to read a very interesting article by Li Ching Chang, who wrote a very powerful, piece on comparison between law and literature, as illustrated by Kafka's The Trial. And this, I think, 35-page paper, rather 70-page paper, is probably the classic to understand the entire doctrine which is emerging through the Kafka's writing on trial. And I think any student would be, enriched and would be fascinated to this beautiful illustration in this particular work. So I'm not someone who can, elaborate it more, but I find yesterday only I was interacting with a group of students, and one of these students happened to say that, sir, there is a lot in Indian literature and Indian writings which we are not probably, subscribing to. And I mentioned that as a very avid reader of Hindi literature, I said I find Premchand to be a world-class jurist who has very nicely portrayed the human greed, selfishness, the feud, the dispute, dishonesty. And I think such a powerful depiction of the social mores and social traditions contributing to the social decay and social disorganization of the society, and a variety of conflict through the writing, whether it is Gavan or it is the Seva Sadan or it is Panch Parmeshwar, very powerful writing. And lastly, another piece of writing which I think every law student must read, it's a Hindi book, because I have mentioned many Western writing. I think, Srilal Shukla's Rag Darwari was so powerfully done that even a TV serial was prepared, and I read that book many times. And if you want to understand the society, the community, that's the great way. And probably the literature has been given so much importance in exploring the legal doctrine because of the fact that law essentially reflects the the structure of the society, the entire face of the society. So probably that value of reflecting the social traditions, the social makeup of the contemporary society, and then how it is impacting human relationship, that becomes something very important. So against this backdrop, I find this kind of seminar will go a very long way in exploring the nexus between the language, law, and literature, especially when we have the gracious presence of some very senior experts who have very deeply studied this nexus and this connection. And I'm sure that would be many takeaways from this conversation that you are going to have today. And I'm sure that this is going to be very, very productive. Let us make a serious note of it. And also find out what are the further pathways to carry forward this discussion for the benefit of the RGNUL community here. So with this, I close, and I again extend my sincere welcome to the experts who are present here to address the gathering today, and the faculty colleagues and the students. Thank you one and all for having me today here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. I would now like to request Dr. Navleen Multani to give a brief introduction to the theme of the symposium.
Thank you, Namah. Thank you, sir, for your very, very wise words. Venerable Vice-Chancellor RGNUL, Professor G.S. Bajpai, respected Registrar Professor Naresh Kumar Butts in absentia, Professor Nibir Ghosh, Chief Editor Re-Markings, Professor Prasannanshu, Director, Center for Linguistic Justice and Endangered Languages, Ms. Chanima Wijebandara, Judicial Officer, Sri Lanka, Chair for Session 1, Dr. Tanya Mander, colleagues, guests, distinguished guests, dear students and past participants, a very pleasant morning to you all. We are here today to deliberate on the interdisciplinary matrix of language, law, and literature. Today's word is a very hyper-competitive word, which is driven by hierarchies and scales that measure knowledge. But we at RGNUL believe that it is essential to direct the learners to the right path in their pursuit of wisdom. The symposium today aims to unravel the relationship between language and society. It also endeavors to understand the crucial intersection between law and literature, along with the indispensable role of words in comprehending the culture, laws, words, and truth. Words, we all know, are the forces of creation. From the very dawn of creation, words have been associated with power. In the first chapter of Genesis, God speaks, and the word comes into being. Words, says Jacques Derrida, have the power to say, to do, to undo, to counter, to contradict, and the quasi-phantasmatic power to bring about. As words determine thoughts, they cast a philosophical language which manifests in the literary works. So in this symposium, we are going to talk about all this, and we are going to, the resource persons are going to reflect upon the importance of deep reading, rethinking of the literary and the legal text, which actually provides a new lexicon that becomes a driving force to move forward. Already, we are aware of the fact that language is a social institution which manifests in many linguistic and non-linguistic ways. No doubt it is essential for communication and socialization. It includes those institutions which pertain the domain of law. So linguistic knowledge facilitates the understanding of the substance of law. Laws are coded in language, and the processes of law are mediated through language. The legal system permeates many aspects of life and puts beliefs and values of society into action. It has always been our endeavor at RGNUL to acquaint our students, with this kind of a relationship and the way to understand certain legal texts or some legal interpretations through language as well as literature. Undoubtedly, law regulates communication and social practice, but its dependence on language for its realization and operation can never be obliterated. The emotive, conative, referential, poetic, phatic, and metalingual functions are common to both ordinary language and the legal language. Literary works encompass the word and inform us what law is and what it ought to be. Literary scholars interpret inconsistencies in the patterns of law that intersect human interests. So therefore, it is an effort, to make our students think, analyze the legal themes in the literary work and the interpretation of the legal texts, which will enable not only the legal scholars, the budding lawyers, but also the future judges, to understand the laws better. Already, we heard so much from our Vice Chancellor, and we are fortunate to have Sir with us, that he is the guiding and the steering force, catalyzing us all to move in a direction, where we can explore more and more things. And hence, this becomes an exploration into words and the words. Reading of the fictional and non-fictional works, Sir mentioned many a lot, and we at RGNUL have been reading Sophocles, George Orwell. We make a reference to Foucault, Auden, Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Amitav Ghosh, Margaret Atwood, William Golding, Arthur Miller. All the students are familiar with their works, and the ones who joined us recently in this batch have yet to read all this. Maybe they might have read this earlier, but we just thought that the Department of English organized this kind of a symposium in order to make them think and examine law from a humane and philosophical perspective, because the narratives, characters, settings in artistic works explore the customs, law, power, authority, paradoxes of equity, legitimacy, punishment, retribution, and redemption to provide an understanding of morality, law, and justice. So believing that this is going to be a very productive and a fruitful exercise for one and all, I would now request Namah to carry on with the proceedings of the day. And I would like to thank one and all for having joined us today. Special thanks to our collaborator, Professor Nibir Ghosh. I remember when I just called Sir, that we are going with this. Would you like to collaborate? He did not think any longer, and he just said, Navleen, go ahead, right? And when the same thing was spoken to Professor Prasannanshu, he was so, very spontaneous in responding. What to say about Chanima, Madam Chanima Wijebandara. It's great to see you here, ma'am. And our acquaintance is through RGNUL Exagium, the competition that we were conducting, and she is the prize-winning candidate. At that time, I did not know that she is also a judicial officer. So greetings to all, and I thank you all for having joined us today. I am grateful to all the faculty members, and I am above all grateful to Professor G.S. Bajpai, our Vice Chancellor, who has facilitated, by saying, go ahead. And yes, so your energy and your inspirational words and encouragement is what we are carrying on with. So I hope this is going to be a fruitful exercise for one and all. I also thank my colleague, chair for the session 1, Dr. Tanya Mander, for having, always we were discussing things. And I hope the students have the pens and notebooks ready for all the observations and any other queries that they have to make in the coming sessions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I would now like to request everyone to switch so that we can capture the moment. And I request Pranit Singh, Raghav, Arora, and the IT cell to take a picture of this precious moment.
I'm grateful to all the faculty members for having joined and having borne with us the slight technical glitch that we had faced earlier. Thank you so much. A smile, please, everyone, so that we can capture the inaugural session. A great thanks to our power behind the show, that is the IT cell, without whom this would not have been possible. Thank you so much, sir. You can let us know if the pictures are over. We can proceed further.
Yes, sir. We have clicked the picture. You can continue.
Thank you so much, Mr. Inderpreet and Mr. Kuldeep. Thank you so much. I would now like to invite Madam Chanima Wijebandara for a few observations, before we can begin with our first session. Ma'am has written, she's a prolific writer. Ma'am, you can unmute yourself. She's a prolific writer. She's a creative writer. Let me tell you, Tea and Me is her book that I have. And ma'am, I have read it word by word. So I would just like you to share a few observations on law and literature. She's a great admirer of Professor Prasannanshu. Sir, she has read your book, Law and Literature. So I think the students will be benefited. Okay. Over to you, ma'am.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, ma'am.
I hope everyone can hear me clearly.
Yes, yes.
I'm delighted to be here. Right. I'm delighted to be here, and thank you very much, Professor Navleen, for this kind invitation. And indeed, I believe that the law students of your university are very lucky to have law and literature as a subject and as to be able to participate in a symposium like this, because from my experience, law is very technical, and it's indeed very essential to mix it up with the ethical issues and to have empathy. So I believe it's very important at the present context to look deeply into literature and law and the interconnections and the interdisciplinary field. So indeed, I'm very happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, ma'am. Professor Ghosh, if you would like to, as a collaborator, add a few sentences before we begin with the session one, so that. So you can unmute.
Yeah. As a collaborator to this wonderful event, I find it absolutely imperative that I thank the Honorable Vice-Chancellor, Dr. Bajpai, Dr. Words, Dr. Chanima, Dr. Navleen, Dr. Tanya, and all the participants. And I must congratulate the university, not for simply for organizing this event, because it doesn't require too much of effort to organize a webinar these days, but to think of a title like Words and Worlds. I think that probably is what attracted me the moment Dr. Navleen shared the flyer with me. And I think if we as human beings, not as lawyers or advocates and judges or that, if we think about the relationship between words and worlds, I think we will be introduced to a world of new experience. And I thank all of you once again, and especially here, I would like to mention that the collaboration of remarkings, there were two reasons. One, it was, I said, words and worlds. And second, because two of these universities' scholars, Dr. Navleen and Dr. Tanya, we rate them as one of the very good contributors to the enrichment of remarkings. And that is what I wish to speak now, because we have a long hour where you will have to endure what we will be sharing on the relation between literature and law. Thank you so much, Dr. Navleen, for giving me this opportunity. in this inaugural. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. We are humbled, and your benign presence means a lot to us. I remember my association with Remarkings since 2009, and my first paper as a research scholar was published in Remarkings. And that's how, on the platform of ELSA blog, both of us, Dr. Tanya and me, we have been writing, we have been attending those wonderful sessions. And we do want to bring such kind of a forum in our own university so that we can more frequently discuss books. Our Vice-Chancellor, Professor G.S. Bajpai, has already enlightened us about so many things. I think the students should get highly inspired to read the books, the works, the words that Sir was referring to. Thank you so much for joining the inaugural session. We, the Department of English, are grateful to one and all, Professor G.S. Bajpai, the experts, Professor Prasannanshu, NLU Delhi, Professor Ghosh, our collaborator, Madam Chanima Wijebandara, my dear faculty colleagues, my dear students, and my colleague, Dr. Tanya, and student coordinators, and above all, the IT cell for having assisted us and for making this possible, despite all the glitches that we know that technology can fail us at moments when we require it the most. Thank you so much, everyone. And Nama, we can now begin with the technical session, that is session 1. You can just invite Sir, Professor Prasannanshu, for the talk. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Lord Denning said, to succeed in the profession of law, you must seek to cultivate command of language. Words are the lawyer's tools of trade. Professor Prasannanshu will be speaking on the topic Law, Language and Literature in the context of legal education and profession. The chair for the session is Dr. Tanya Mander. The session and the talk would be open to questions after the remarks of the chair. Without further ado, I would like to pass the mic today to our distinguished guest, Professor Prasannanshu.
Thank you very much. It has been a wonderful session. Even the inaugural was so full of wisdom. Before I say something, may I just request that as many people as can have the cameras on, please keep the cameras on. I am here basically to talk to the students and faculty. So talk means we can see someone. If there is any question, just please raise your hand. I don't have a structured or planned talk, but I would just like to share my experiences, my perspective. I hope it turns out to be meaningful for some of you at least. And before that, let me thank everyone who has made this event a success. Let me start with Dr. Navleen Multani, Dr. Tanya Mander, and I also would like to acknowledge all the students, IT department, and it is a pleasure to share the platform with Ms. Chanima Wijebandara. A very special feeling of honor fills me when I see that Professor Nibir Ghosh is there, a senior person like him is there. And finally, my friend Dr. N.K. Vats is missing, but I remember him. And Professor Bajpai, I will just have to say a few words for you. One is the Sanskrit saying, Vidya Dadati Vinayam. So the kind words you had for me, I think an outcome of that. The meaning of Vidya Dadati Vinayam is learning gives you politeness. So I don't think that I deserve as much praise as he showered upon me. the effects of his taking over the reins of your university are visible already. And I am very happy because he has given due importance to things which are usually ignored in a professional university. And I think that is a very good beginning, a very good indication. And I also remember, Professor Bajpai will also remember that I made the subject of one writ petition this matter, that how it was a big writ petition. Many of you might have access to it. I drafted most of it. So I think it can also act as a piece of reading for many law schools, especially the sections. That's a good idea, which just struck me. Perhaps I can take the excerpts. It talks about multidisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity, and approach, a holistic approach, which is in consonance with the approach of our national education policy, or new education policy, as we call it. That is the vision that we have for education these days. But I think that is something eternal. We have to understand, and there are so many things, so many thoughts are flooding me that perhaps I may leave something in between, jump to another thought, so you can bring me back. Like whatever Professor Bajpai said today, I think that was complete in itself, and I will only try to elaborate or add to some of the things. Even if I just remark on what he said, I think that will take the whole time. He mentioned about Tolstoy, Kafka, Tagore, and many famous jurists, Justice Krishna Iyer. He also talked about Indian writers, Munshi Premchand, Sri Lal Shukla, and many more things. So that must give a perspective to the students of law and my colleagues who have not that much exposure to literature and language. See, there are two things. The topic that has been given to me is law, language, and literature in the context of legal education and profession. And also, the overall theme is exploring words and words. This is a very ancient theme that is something like Shabd Brahm. And as Madam also mentioned, in John 1:1 in the Bible, it is said, in the beginning there was nothing but the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That is the international edition of the New Testament. So, that thing is reflected in Matsya Purana also, and the concept of Shabd Brahm is there. So word and word, they are very closely integrated, no doubt. And we can philosophically argue, we can philosophically explore whether they are the same or the different things. Because what we perceive, that is in words. Our whole perception of the world is codified in language. Whatever we do, practically everything that human beings do is mediated by language. So law is no exception to that. You can think of any field of activity, any profession, but specifically it has been said, like Gibbons has said, law is language. I might have slightly changed the expression, but that is true, partly true. I won't say that it is the absolute truth, but it is a very important perspective. And if you look at it from one direction, that is absolute truth. That is what Ekantvadi Drishtikon is, one-sided perspective is. But if we take the Anekantvadi perspective of looking at things from many different directions, then it is one of the truths. That is what we would say. Why law is language? Because why he said this, let me slightly elaborate this. One is, see, all the laws are coded in language. They are written in language. In good old days, it was oral tradition. Laws were oral. Now we are writing them down. but whether we are writing or we are speaking, it is something to do with language. It is very important to trace the history of language and legal language within that, which is a sub part of it. Peter Tiersma has written a wonderful piece on that. So law and language are inseparables. They are inseparable to the degree that Gibbons called it law is language. Like whatever we do in our profession, in the practice of law, starting from the client interview to examination in chief, to cross-examination, to drafting, pleading, to judging, to judgment writing, to the defense speech, memorials, drafts, whatever it is, everything is in language. And if we don't have a command over language, we cannot expect to have command over the profession of law. If you look at all the great lawyers, Professor Bajpai mentioned several of them, Justice Krishna Iyer, for example, one of the greatest jurists. In the petition I just mentioned, there was a debate on the issue of jurist also. Who is a jurist? Because it is a much violated, much misused term. It is just a fashionable word for many people. Dictionaries also talk very little about it. But I think instinctively we know what is a jurist, who gives a new direction to the thinking of law. And that person may or may not even be an LLB. Some of the greatest lawyers in history, like like Cicero, they if you look at the defense speeches or like Pro Archias was delivered 2,500 years ago, you would see they didn't attend any law school. Rather, the concept of law was perhaps not there. I recommend, and perhaps you already have it in your syllabus, it is there in the recommendations of the Bar Council of India. Defense speeches should be there. Pro Amerino is there, but the best one is Pro Archia, in defense of Archias. Let me just give a curtain raiser on that speech, defense speech, and on this author, Cicero. He was not the author because perhaps he never wrote it. He just delivered a speech. But it is so well structured that for 2,500 years, it is across the world a matter of study in the classes of literature, number one. And number two, law schools have also not ignored it. We are lucky that in India, several law schools are taking it up now. But what is the significance of this speech? It was a speech in defense of Archias, Cicero's teacher. If you want to call him a teacher, that is fine, but a tutor, actually a tutor. And he was a Syrian poet. That's interesting, but because of the Roman Empire, people were moving. From Syria, he went to Rome. And there, a very modern, very surprising, astonishing matter was what he saw himself embroiled in. I wonder if I would like to see if someone can guess what was the matter. The matter was of citizenship. This sounds to be very modern, but even 2,500 years ago, such things were happening. And Cicero, out of gratitude for his teacher, as a professional, defended him. And what he said is called a defense speech, like what advocates do in the court. And this speech became a part of literature. So language, literature, law, you are just seeing the transition. They are all interconnected. And the command over language of Cicero is wonderful. Command over language is not only language, is at several levels. Language is not just about words. Language is organized at many, many levels. The first level may be morphology, the words, phonetics, syntax, semantics. But what we are talking of is also the level of discourse. Discourse is like whatever I am saying, it's oral discourse. And if I written it down or if I write it down, that will become a written discourse. So the command over language, first of all, it starts with words, because words are the tools of a language. And if you are a craftsperson of language, then it is very important that your tools are sharp and you have full command over them. You must have seen, it was very frequent in my childhood, there used to be flute sellers who used to go around and sell their flutes. They used to have very simple flutes made up of bamboo, which looked like very simple thing, handmade things. And they were not professional things. They costed maybe 10 rupees. Even now you will get them. But when they played, it appeared that it was the most wonderful instrument in the world. It was better than professional instruments. Or if I play a flute, which is even a professional flute, perhaps I won't be able to, and I don't know how to play a flute. So those people with something that costs almost nothing can create wonderful music. The same applies with words. Number one, your command over words must be there. And if you are able to play them well, you can create magic. So this command we see in Cicero's speech. And what he did was, the legal matter was solved within a few paragraphs, like 8 paragraphs. So it's not a very long speech, but almost double the attention was given on the importance of literature. That is why that speech is very important. And because he was such a master of his craft, of lawyering, of advocacy, that he didn't need much time to defend Archias. And he won the case ultimately. But the bigger thing that he achieved is that we are talking about him today. And we are not alone. The world is aware of him. And another interesting thing is, this gentleman never attended a school. Forget about a law school. Perhaps schools were not there by then. And law schools were not invented, thought of, heard of. And perhaps even the word law was not there. The concept must have been there. It was there. He defended the matter in front of a judge in a court. But the important thing is that what was there in that speech. One is the skill, the art, sorry. And the second important thing is what he said about literature, his vision about literature and law. So that is the beginning, and it is not a new thing which we are talking about today. Thousands of years ago also, people were very clear about it. Another thing that I would like to emphasize upon is that law is not divorced, it is not separated from literature, from language, from humanities. Rather, they have a common origin, or perhaps we can even look at it this way, that law grew out of humanities. So first thing which I would recommend is this word, negative word should be discarded in law schools, like law, non-law. What is non-law? It is, first of all, the vision is that we have a single mass of learning. Knowledge is one. Using a negative word creates a negativity ab initio in the minds of the learners, in the minds of the researchers, everywhere. Because we have to look at law from a broader perspective, from the perspective of justice. And this can be achieved only if we are connected, not disconnected. It is not just a technical course. It is a technical course, of course, but in the course of your education, what you have to learn is the wholeness of it. That brings me to Tagore, his experiments with education in Shantiniketan. And I hope some people are there, or everyone has it been so terribly boring that everyone has dozed off, or what?
No, sir, we
No, not at all, sir. We are all here. We're all
we
here.
are all
Please.
ears to you, sir.
And enraptured by your talk.
I am extremely sorry. I am just a teacher. I talk to walls.
Same fraternity, sir. We are all teachers. We are all listening to you, sir. Please.
So let's see. That is my weakness. I can't be a great YouTuber because there you have to sit in front of the camera and just speak. It's always nice if I get some feedback, if some people ask something. Okay, anyway. So if some people can keep their cameras on, maybe I will get the illusion that a lot of people, there are a lot of people I can see, 163. Okay, so I was telling about the holistic approach of humanities. We are dealing with learning as such. I was talking about Tagore. He has talked about this division of knowledge and division of the individual. Why study of, within inverted commas, let me use this word, non-law, is very important, which includes social sciences and humanities. It is important because, first of all, law is nothing in isolation. Like literature is nothing in isolation. Nothing is complete in isolation. Everything is complete in its holistic sense. And since, and this example was very interesting, Cicero's example, he was a person who was trained by a poet, Archias. And he has himself mentioned all this in that defense speech, that how the study of literature helped him to be a good advocate. For being a good advocate, you certainly need a good command over language and an understanding of the literature. So let me say a few more things. Then coming back to Tagore, Rabindranath Tagore, Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, what he has hinted at, I think it is useful for all of us. If we have a lopsided education, it is like a shot of vitamins or steroids. If such shots are given to a person, perhaps for a few days, that person may thrive, may even look healthy. I think we have this gym culture these days, and substance abuse, I will call, culture of steroids. So everyone knows about it. What happens? Lopsided nourishment is provided, and the outcome is like failure of organs, like kidney failure, and the failure of the overall metabolic system. Likewise, if we as students, we have a responsibility to learn. If we become passive, if we think that teachers are there to teach us, somehow they can teach us, it is impossible. Again, going back to the gym, if you pay the gym, you may get the best of trainers, but if you don't move your limbs, if you don't exercise, nothing will happen. You have to build your body. Likewise, you have to build your education. You have to educate yourself. So you must be aware not to take only one type of nourishment. Let it be a complete nourishment. This word has been used by Tagore also in his experiences of the school, as a student and as a teacher, as someone who founded Shantini. There are a lot of examples in front of us. if we look at all the famous lawyers, we should look at them. And some of the very famous lawyers are all around us, and they have been there in the history. I mentioned one or two already. But if you look at Gandhiji, I think you might be aware, most of you must be aware, that he was an advocate. He was a barrister. Now the distinction in India is not there, barrister and pleader and this and that. We only have advocates. So we can learn from their lives, and the contemporary advocates are there. Of course, there are classicals like Lord Denning, Justice Krishna Iyer, etc., etc. Cardozo is there. So what we see from their lives is that if you have tried to explore what type of persons they were, if you have tried to emulate them, if you have tried to become like them, you would all notice immediately that they all had exemplary command over language, and they have the famous lawyers. Am I right or wrong? Maybe you can give it in the comments. Okay. Yeah. Someone wants me to be a bit louder. Okay. So command over language, as Lord Denning has also written, this is the title of his work, that is essential in the profession of law. I will give you another example. We know about Gandhiji. Many of you must have read the autobiography of Gandhiji. And if you haven't, you must read. He was an advocate, and he has described in his autobiography in some detail his experiences as a student of law and also his practice, which can be very important and enlightening for all of us. So Gandhiji studied in London, all of us know. It was one of the best law schools, or the best law school in the world at that point. You are in a very good law school yourselves. You are in NLU. So the education that Gandhiji obtained is almost beyond question. That was the best possible education. And that education created many famous advocates. But if you have heard about his practice in India, like what he did in India as an advocate, you would be startled. He spent 6 months in India to try to establish his legal practice in Bombay. There were many experiences that he has described, but let me come directly to his first case. After a long struggle, he got the case of one Mami Bai, and he charged a fee of rupees 35 for that, which was a decent amount. The case was very simple. And when he went to the court to represent this lady, he was not able to speak anything. He did not utter much. He was not even able to stand. Perhaps he fainted in the courtroom. Now someone who was educated in one of the best or the best school, law school in the universe, just to exaggerate, I am saying universe. Obviously, I don't expect there are other law schools in the universe. So do we expect this outcome from such a person? What could have been the reason? I think the reason was that he was not able to communicate. His skills of communication were not honed. His tools of expression were not sharp enough. So that was the outcome, and he decided not to contest or not to plead for anyone in India again. He has also written in his autobiography that it was out of sheer necessity, not out of some great sense of righteousness, because he says that no one would have entrusted any case to me. after this fiasco in the court. After that, he practiced for 20 years in South Africa. And there, that is very interesting for you to read what all happened there, what were his experiences. So that is what literature can give you, insights into the experiences of the famous people, famous lawyers, and what we can learn from them. The most important thing you can learn from the experiences of Gandhiji as a lawyer, as an advocate, is that he tried to maintain the integrity. I will give you one sutra or mantra, that is that an advocate is an officer of the court. And the role of an advocate is to uphold justice, to aid the court in providing justice. It is not just as a servant or as a paid employee of the client. So this important thing Gandhiji practiced. He even refused to take cases, but generally it is the duty of an advocate to represent a person, and whether you know that that is a person who has committed a wrong, because even people who have committed a wrong, committed a crime, they have rights. The human rights remain there. And one of the important rights is that they must be represented. And I think that if we look back at literature, we will see that how these things evolve. For example, if you look at Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice, you would see that there was a trial. There is a courtroom scene there. And in that trial, Shylock, who is projected as evil, as someone who deserves no mercy, we see that this person was not represented by an advocate at all. And what were the outcomes? Now in the school, all of us must have read this story, heard of this. The outcome is that we end up believing that great justice was done. But I think it was one of the gravest injustices that was committed in the courtroom. It was violation of human rights. It was, there were communal and racist remarks in the open court. And there was a total fraud going on in the court. I wonder, as students of law, if you have examined it this way, it was fraud ab initio. I am not defending Shylock. He committed one mistake. And that mistake was legal or illegal, that is another matter. The mistake was a human weakness. That human weakness was that he was not able to forgive. Rather, he wanted to destroy his enemy. Destroying our enemy does not make us humans. And there is a talk of Christian quality of mercy, but whether that mercy was shown or not, that we have to see. Then, if you look at that case, you would realize that there is a distinction now between attempt to murder and murder. But at that point, it wasn't there. Perhaps by this very work, this is a matter of research, this concept has arisen, and now it is in their different jurisdictions, jurisprudences. This concept is very much there, that attempt to murder is different from murder. So I think I will stop at this point. I don't really know at what time, how much time is remaining or not remaining, but if you say something, that will be really nice to ask things.
That was very interesting, sir. Before we open the house for further questions, I think, Professor Prasannanshu, you have initiated the idea of word and worlds through literary text, a number of literary text and literary writers, that it's going to be quite a task to weave them all together. You are absolutely right when you were talking about that students need to have command over language if they want to have command over law. I think as teachers of literature to law students and language teachers to law students, we've all experienced that nothing is more dramatic, nothing is more attractive than bringing into the class a text which talks about human complex situations. Because law and literature are essentially dealing with stories, stories that are representing our social, cultural, legal paradigms. So, yes, and I think one of the most beautiful things of teaching literature to law students is where law tells you that there is no space for any ambivalence, any ambiguity. Literature introduces the polarity of these within our living context. Law makes no space for any ambiguity, any ambivalence. But when you look at George Orwell's works or Premchand's Godan, Kuli, or Manto's stories for that matter, you talked about Merchant of Venice, but you bring in Antigone, the idea of human law and divine law, the conflict, the rights of the dead. So yes, I think it opens the words to the world of ambivalence and ambiguity. Also, when you were talking about how there are so many dimensions of truth, I feel that when we are talking to children in the class about linguistics like semantics and pragmatics, and I keep referring back to Michel Foucault in the class when in Your Order of Things he talks about that we are still debating whether it is the utterance that defines the truth or the truth is already present in the cultural context which situates the utterance where it is. So yes, we cannot stress it enough, we cannot underline it enough, that command over language, understanding of these stories of human conflict, of human complexities, helps us to do better at understanding law. Interpretation is one aspect of it, but being, like you said, humanely open to the idea of so many different voices talking to us through literature. And thank you so much. It was a pleasure listening to you, sir. And the only reason why my camera was getting switched off time and again was because my phone is running low on battery. So the charging point is somewhere further away from where I'm sitting. And we now open the house to the questions. Anyone at all, please.
Now open to questions.
Namah, do you have any messages that probably students had sent before?
Yes.
I do see Jerry posing a question.
He can switch on his video, please. Javier, you can switch on your video, unmute yourself and ask your question. Similarly, the rest may also, they can raise their hands and switch on their videos and ask the question to sir.
I'll read the question if Mr. Javeer is unable to unmute. The question is, what does the language policy in the new education policy 2020 mean for linguistic justice? Can the IT cell please unmute him?
Inderpreet sir, can you just unmute Javeer? He is unable to unmute.
Yes, ma'am. Wait. Yes, ma'am. Wait. Yes, Javier,
Or
please.
Namah,
Please.
Okay.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, Javier, you're audible.
Thank you, sir, for your thought-provoking and educational talk. And as you may have read in the chat box, the question was about the new education policy.
David, you have two systems on echoing, so please.
Javier, you have on from two user
From
account.
two user account.
Here one
Here,
account.
one account.
One, yeah, that will help.
Hello, Javier.
Yes, sir.
Now you can speak.
Yes, sir. So, what does the language policy in the NEP 2020 mean for linguistic justice? This was my question.
Wonderful question. Basically, it talks about mother tongues and linguistic justice. First of all, I wonder how you perceive it. But see, linguistic justice I see as a part of the constitutional or the preamble's social justice. Social justice is an umbrella term which is given in the preamble. And how to define it? What is social justice? That must include linguistic justice also, because it is about a linguistic community. If I am not allowed to speak my language, my mother tongue, then I am ab initio disadvantaged. Suppose whatever your mother tongue is, you are born in a city or in your own city, town, or state, if that language has become a minority language or a low prestige language, then what will happen? No one in the school will speak that language, and a lot of interaction will take place, lot of instruction, lot of teaching will take place in that language. You will start missing out and you will be labeled as dumb or someone less brilliant, or people from your community as less brilliant. This is what happens with millions of people across the world, because we have a unique type of system in India, that is linguistic states. But even then, within every state, we have around 1600 languages. There are hundreds of languages in every state. How many state languages are there? One or two. And how many languages are practiced in the core? Just one or two languages. All right, so other people have a basic inherent disadvantage. So bridging this gap means bringing about linguistic justice. Have I answered this? And NEP is talking about emphasis on mother tongues. So this way it answers your question, if you are satisfied with that.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
If anyone else has any questions, please unmute yourself.
Good morning, sir. Am I audible? Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for that enlightening session, sir. So my question here is that do you think that the kind of language that we use in our courtrooms or the legal language, is it an impediment for the illiterate people who seek justice in India? The illiterate people, of course, no language can be be used to make the process easier for them. So do you think this is like an impediment, or can we have a solution to this?
There are two or three things that you've asked. One is, it's an impediment. Yes, it is, without any doubt. And another thing you said, for illiterate people, I would say even for literate people, even for people who know the language, like even English teachers or Hindi teachers or Punjabi teachers, it is impediment for them also. Why? Because legal language is slightly different from ordinary language. There is nothing wrong with it. But if you use it in a way to create hurdles, which it's often done, then it is a scam, scandal, unfair means, whatever you call it. You must have seen in your cell phones, there are legal agreements to everything. You download an app and they ask you for your soul and for everything in the world, your privacy, your all the rights. They can hear you anytime, at day or night, at home or outside. They can record you. You have given all the permissions. You have suppose 100 apps in your phone. perhaps 20 or 30 people have the rights to do everything. But have you ever read it? What they have said, what they have asked for, read it. It will be eye-opening. You already know. You already know that what are the things they can do. So how it is achieved? Some wonderful lawyer, corporate lawyer, sits and drafts that, and then it is presented in such fine print that no one can have the patience, even a person like me. Even I don't read everything. Maybe I attempted reading one or two. Then some of my students, they also did a wonderful thing. We took up a project called Simple EULA. We have a website you can see. So what we do is we look at these agreements and we put them in simple language so that people can understand. It is not a very big project, but we have been running it for several years now, 5-6 years. So some agreements are there, some contracts are there. Coming to how to solve it, there can be legislation. There is a whole movement called plain English movement. We don't have it, sadly. Not in a very visible way, although in NLU Delhi we talk about it very prominently, consciously, but I don't know if the courts are also conscious of it. Our endeavor is to take this even to the courts, to the professionals, and the simplest way for a teacher is to talk to the students. I'm talking to you now, wherever you go, this idea will go with you. So I hope that a time will come when all the teachers, all the colleagues of law, of literature, or different things talk to their students about this concept of injustice, which is inherent, inbuilt, hidden, and packaged word to the litigants. Litigant is the end user of language, of the law. And if we design that language in a way that the litigant is not able to break the shackles or locks of meaning, then it is a bit of it is inadvertent because of your educational status, educational level. That may be one thing, but a lot of it is advertent, as I just demonstrated.
Right, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
The next question is from Antas Prakash Singh. Can you unmute yourself and please ask your question?
Also shared in the chat my email and my website's link, so that if you have any question, you can follow it up. You can just contact me. Yes.
Antas, you can ask your question. You have again muted yourself. Please unmute and then ask question.
I'm so sorry, sir. Good morning,
One
sir.
thing I must say, Antas, before you say, let me compliment RGNUL. Such difficult questions have never been posed. I think they are really challenging questions, and let me just congratulate myself. Yes, I could say a few words on them.
My question to you is that we already know that English, whether in the form of literature or language, does not belong to the Indian subcontinent. English is only concentrated to elitist group and working class. So how long English, both in the form of literature and language, will take to be accepted as other popular language of the subcontinent, be it like Hindi, Punjabi or Bengali?
All right, gentlemen, thank you for bringing about this issue. Something very close to my heart. Let me answer it in several ways. One is, see, my mother tongue is Hindi. And I always tell my students, I have the right, I think that I have a right to teach English as a professor of English because I am a writer of Hindi. And my Hindi is no worse than of my fellow writers. I also know a bit of Punjabi. And in fact, in Patiala, I am registered for a Punjabi course also in Punjab University because my friend, the head of the department there, floated a course. He said, we want students. I said, I am the first one. I know a bit of it. Let me learn more of it. I know Bangla, a bit of Urdu. So it is, and perhaps a few more languages. The important thing, what I'm trying to answer is, we cannot force 130 million crore peoples. There is no need of forcing anyone. Bring about a change in yourself. Whatever your mother tongue is, do whatever you can do for it. Number one. And not because it's your duty, it may be, but because to become a complete person, not by wearing some big jam or something, or becoming a complete person, what you have to do is, you have to be connected with your roots. And language is the key to culture, to the roots, to your place. So you cannot ignore it. This must be done. And I think you asked some other things also. Please tell me, but I have not answered.
Yes, sir. That English is only concentrated to elitist group and working class. So how long English, both in the form of literature and language, will take to be accepted as other popular language of the subcontinent?
How your question is about English, when English will be accepted?
Yes,
that's the question.
English literature, English both in form of literature and language, sir.
Oh, maybe I thought it you have asked the other way around. Anyway, see, it already has a lot of acceptance and it has its own utility, certainly. But if we make it compete with our mother tongues, then we are doing something wrong. That is what I feel. But otherwise, English is serving a very useful purpose also. It is acting as a link language. We are able to communicate across languages, and also the very foundations of our nation may shake if we try to say that only one of our languages, because we have 1600 languages and a lot of official languages, 2-3 dozen official languages. So if we try to superimpose one language, then there would be problem. This purpose also is being served by English, because and English is also giving us or linking us with the world. So that is a utility. If we take it as a tool, and if we don't associate nationalism or otherwise with it, then it is very useful. And there is a lot of acceptance, no doubt. Government after government, state government after state government is saying that they are bringing it to the level of primary education, to lower education, etc. So that is a proof of acceptance. And why governments do it? Because of popular demand. It is not being superimposed. I think in Punjab also, I was there a few days ago. So I saw all the government boardings when Captain Amrinder Singh was there. I think he has also claimed that I have introduced English at primary level. Am I right? Madam, you are muted. Please unmute and say.
Yes, sir, you're absolutely right. And one of the major reasons for demand is because they believe that if your child is not fluent and proficient in English, the job market sort of shrinks for such a child, and therefore, and the state government is reflecting what the populist demands are actually. Yes.
State governments or any government cannot afford to go against the popular sentiment. Have I answered you, sir?
Yes, thank you so much, sir.
Namah, I just would like, Javeer, are you still there? You had one question regarding the forensic linguist's role in the court
Yes, ma'am.
proceedings.
Yes,
Javeer?
ma'am.
Sir, he
Yes,
has
ma'am.
asked a question, how do forensic linguists help in the court proceedings?
Well. It's too much to
Yes, sir,
ask.
this was my question.
This is not your question?
This was my question.
Okay, great. Thanks for putting your signatures to it. So my answer is, how much time do I have? 2-3 minutes? Okay. See, forensic linguists' role in what? In the courtroom. Okay. This is a very good question you
Yes, sir.
asked. The question is good for me because at the moment I am delivering a course called Forensic Linguistics in NLU Delhi. And perhaps I can send this offer to your university also, then you can also join. Now, what is forensic linguistics? There is a current case of the Mahant's suicide, and there is a suicide note. And by the way, I was invited by Zee Hindustan to testify as a forensic linguist to give some evidence, or I know these are technical terms, basically to give opinion. So I will tell you something because I spent a whole day in analyzing that suicide note. That will explain to you what it is about. See, in good old days, there used to be a document like this document. Okay. If there was a suicide, there used to be a document always, or ransom call or threat call. And what we used to do, I have some exposure to forensic science also. I studied it in Delhi University. We used to look at the paper, the texture of it, its microscopic, chemical, and different examinations. We also looked at the ink, the chemical composition of ink, then the typewriter or whatever it was used for writing, or the handwriting. But nowadays, a lot has changed. Like very often, even this Mahant's case is a slightly different thing where there is a paper. But I got a photocopy of that only to analyze. So basically, I had to rely on the language and a bit on handwriting also. They are different things. Language and handwriting are different things. So from the language, I could decipher. Many experts on the TV have been saying that many people wrote it. There is a difference of ink. Difference of date is also there. But my linguistic analysis showed me that the author is the same. It appears to be the same. And secondly, the author also appears to suffer from a linguistic disorder. Appears, this is important. And as an expert of anything, any expert testimony, it's not binding on the court. That's a very beautiful thing, very important thing. Why it is not a binding thing? Because we look only at one aspect. Again, I was talking about perspectives. We look only at one perspective of the truth. The whole of the investigation, then its overview must lie within the hands of a human being, the judge. So that is why it is not binding, but they may consider that evidence. First of all, whether it is admissible or not. Generally, it is admissible. Sometimes evidence is not even admissible, some types of evidence. So what we do is, in forensic linguistics, we look at language, its peculiarities, independent of the handwriting. And based upon that, we arrive at conclusions whether author is single, there are multiple authors, whether the author, what could be the educational qualifications of that author, what could be the region, many things, dialectology, idiosyncrasies, idiolects, they are different. So in a nutshell, this is what we do in forensic linguistics.
Thank you, sir, for explaining it with a recent example.
Thank you so much, sir. Actually, even, this was the question which we got on the top. This was the first question that I got from the Google Forms, which students had collected. And I was really wondering, Javier, I hope sir has satisfied all your queries. And it's okay with you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Aditi, you also had some question, and Shreya, you can just unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Am I audible?
Next time, I think when I talk, if and when, then I think I should just take the questions. That is the best thing. Yes, yes, please go ahead.
Please, thank you so much, sir and ma'am, for this amazing session. So I was reading Jonathan Livingston Seagull yesterday, and I came across this concept of freedom. The book talks about that the only true law is that which leads to freedom, and law which impedes the development of an individual is law which should be changed because law responds to the society. So, how do we see the convergence between law and literature here? And how can we bring forth these ideas put forth by literature into actual legal practice?
Of the tradition of a difficult question. It's too difficult for me to answer, but let me attempt. In terms of a generality, say, I perceive the world as the middle path. All realities are in the middle. Not realities. Realities are many, 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 infinitely many. But how to live in this world? As an advocate, as an individual, everything can be done by treading the middle path. I am borrowing it from Gautam Buddha, not my saying. Don't go and erect a temple for me. So freedom is a very important keyword, and in law, in real life, everywhere, the freedom of the individual and survival of the society. Two things are the extremes. And what we do, and what is the evolution of jurisprudence is, we keep negotiating this middle point where we are here, slightly here. So nowadays, like earlier it was everyone's business. What you do in the village, everyone kept an eye on you, what you're doing. But now a lot of things are coming in the domain of individuals, choice, right, freedom, etc., etc. So this negotiation is ongoing. There is no absolute answer. There will never be an absolute answer. People in the profession of law will remain because they have to keep negotiating the middle point for the society, on behalf of the society, for the individual, for the betterment of the individual.
Thank you, sir.
Are there any more questions? Looks like you finally answered all their queries.
All the questions. Yes. Looks like. Hello, ma'am. Hi, this is Sachin here.
Yes,
Hi.
Sachin, go right ahead.
Yeah, I chatted, posted my question. Not a question, I just want a kind of reflection. So, sir, how do you see the role of silence? Because I again feel that the silence is one of the strongest mode of communication. And I'm coming from the disability jurisprudence because there we feel or face the kind of a language barrier. And the way I read Derrida, that how language become a barrier, that it stops you from really talking about that the inner and the outer perspective. So there I talked about the word to know the inner word in that sense. That word has its own consciousness, and the speaker or the participant has that sensitivity towards it. So then, but when it became a politics, because when it came out and then we started giving our own expressions to it, and then we somewhere lose the games where it became something different. So yeah, kindly, sir, what's your take on this?
It was really nice listening to you. Can you please do me a favor? Just ask the question in a single straight sentence.
Yeah, single form is this only. That's what I tried pointing out in chat box. That what is your take on the role of silence? So how do you see the silence as a mode of communication?
All right. Now it is much more comprehensible for me. See, when we study the field of communication, in communication, there are three modes of communicating: verbal, non-verbal, paralinguistic. Verbal is only 7% according to Mehrabian, but I have a take on that. Maybe someday we can talk on that. Rest 38% and 55% is paralinguistic and non-verbal. So if we look at paralinguistic, 38%. Within paralinguistic communication, there are several things, including volume, frequency, pitch, intonation, fluency, non-fluency, pauses. Now this pauses is about silence. Silence or the pauses in between are a means of communication. First thing I would like to note. Second, I know that your question is like the tip of the iceberg. I can see that there is an iceberg there. Perhaps I'm not able to realize how big the iceberg is. But certainly if under disability jurisprudence, it is a challenge which has to be faced. But when we are talking of jurisprudence, the challenge should not be faced by someone who suffers a disability, but the challenge must be faced together by the society. That is the whole purpose of creating a society. That is the purpose of being together. And that is the purpose of even thinking of jurisprudence. Right? Yeah.
Sir, could I please add to that?
Madam, please. You are the organizer, yes.
No, but the question was aimed for you actually. So, such an inner world which is using words to construct its own realities and worlds, I think the polemic that you're trying to draw between silence and word is, for me at least, it's negative is a very strong word, but it is right. It's not right. I believe where you are wanting recognition, silence is marginalization. Silence is subaltern. That's how I link to it. If you are not being looked at, if you're not being heard, that is putting you outside the margin of the mainstream. So I don't think silence in the world which is creating its own reality every day, I would not agree that silence is a form of communication. The world needs to hear every story, every experience, so that it can bring in the ideas, policies, rules, and of course laws to talk about what has not been talked about so far. At least that's how I feel, Sachin.
You are certainly right, but silence has a granular structure. Silence is not amorphous. It is made up of many things. Like silence may be forced, like a rape victim may be forced into silence. Then this applies what you are saying. That force may be by physical force, societal force, by a whole spectrum of things which we can explore. But there can be an empowered silence also. Like even to show your dominance, we maintain silence at times. So who is initiating this silence? Whether it is coming from inside or it is coming from outside. It is forced or it is voluntary. Silence can communicate many things, like silent agreement. You are agreeing silently. Silence is communication. It's a powerful means of communication. But silence is not a unitary thing. It is made up of many parts. We could think of only 3 or 4, but if we invite everyone here, perhaps they will be able to give us, according to Derrida only, like there are someone mentioned, maybe hundreds of silences can be listed even in this session if we convert it into a session on silence, workshop on silence.
So the only thing is that when he talked about the disability jurisprudence and that that's the area that I started looking at it. That's how I read or heard his question, so to speak.
That I answered that disability jurisprudence is a very different thing, and the society's very purpose is to not let it remain an individual's disability or an individual's challenge. That is the only purpose of civilization. Absolutely. That challenges don't remain individual. That is also about criminal law. The theory of criminal law I am extending to this point. Criminal law talks about crime against the state. So I am saying something new. I am saying challenge against the state.
Thank you. I just wanted to add, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for adding. That has enriched my perspective, certainly.
Thank you so much, sir. It has been an insightful talk, and I think the interactive session has been more insightful. And we hope that we actually, the young curious minds, they had several questions, and to great satisfaction of theirs, you have already answered that. I appreciate the middle path, the things that you were talking about. And yes, definitely, silence speaks louder than the words. Silence, I think, is the word, words that they are taking form. So I really would like to thank you, sir, for taking time out and discussing, interacting with our students. And I also thank the chair for the session, Dr. Tanya Mander. And thank you, Dr. Sachin, for your questions and triggering another thoughts and another session on silence, right? So, sir, now like this already, from the last 3-4 years, we had been contemplating upon this, but probably it had to happen in a scene like this when we get technologically connected, right? So this digital connection had to make that possible. Thank you so much, sir, for your intellectual talk, and you have inspired our students to strengthen their reading skills and also work upon their spoken skills as well. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. It was a wonderful being associated. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much, sir, for this session. Now I would like to call Dr. Professor Nibir Ghosh, and he will be speaking on the subject today, why literature matters in the study and practice of law. Without further ado, I would like to pass the mic to the distinguished guest.
Dr. Professor Prasannanshu, Dr. Navleen, Dr. Tanya, Raghav Arora, Pranit Singh, Namah Bose, faculty members, RGNUL, dear students, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to extend my greetings on behalf of Re-Markings to Professor Prasannanshu for highlighting a very important dimension which could be of great interest to students. I greet you on behalf of Re-Markings, and since we are the co-host, I also thank you from the core of my heart. It was wonderful listening to you. Well, as Namah said, what I'm supposed to be talking about is why literature matters in the study and practice of law. Friends, in a digitalized setting we are in, it is somewhat eerie, that you cannot see all the participants listening to you, and you almost have a feeling of Orwellian Big Brother watching you. So I extend my greetings on behalf of Re-Markings to all the young participants who are by default big brothers watching what the others are doing. Well, friends, to begin with what I'm trying to share with you, I'm not delivering any talk as such. I would like to share my experiences with you as a teacher, writer, scholar, editor, someone who has seen how the courts function, how the judges function, how the advocates work. I would like to begin with 2 quotes of W.H. Auden, one of the greatest poets of the 20th century. One statement he makes in Disillusionment in 1939. He says, poetry makes nothing happen. If we keep that in mind, we will say that any discussion of any connectivity of literature becomes redundant. Another quote which I'm going to use is where Auden says, "You cannot tell people what to do." Because Dr. Navleen had mentioned in the inaugural, that what we say is going to inspire people. So I've come with no words of inspiration as such. What Auden says is, you cannot tell people what to do. You can only tell them parables. And that is what art really is. And what is art? Particular stories of particular people and experiences from which each according to his immediate and peculiar needs may draw his own conclusions. So what I'm going to share with you is a collage of impressions. And you have to draw your own conclusions. I'm not going to move on a straight track. When we talk about the RGNUL or all the institutes that are catering to law, what the first thought that comes to my mind is that law itself is a very challenging profession, the legal profession, because you have the complexity. Even when you look at the deity of justice, the deity of justice, who was represented as Themis in ancient Greek, she is blindfolded. Justice is blindfolded, holding a pair of scales in one hand and a sword in the other, which ideally represents that blindness represents fairness and impartiality, as well as the gift of prophecy. This is idealism. And what is reality? You see an Amitabh Bachchan movie like Andha Kanun, and you have a different interpretation of the blindfolded deity of justice. I will now share a quote, and I will tell you the author after I'm done with the quote. This statement says, the lawyers will, as a rule, advance quarrels instead of repressing them. It is within my knowledge that they are glad when men have disputes. Petty pleaders actually manufacture them. Their touts, like so many leeches, suck the blood of the poor people. Friends, I'll now disclose the name from whom the quote comes. It is Mahatma Gandhi writing in Hind Swaraj. And you know where Gandhi is concerned. He himself said that when I was taking up the profession of law in the Delhi court, I often heard that a lawyer's profession is a liar's profession. So in the midst of all these complexities, the challenges that the profession as such offers, in a free country, in a free democratic country, justice is available to everyone. But in order to go for justice, the kind of impediments that you have to face is, you feel that it is better to go the way of Karl Marx, who said, religion is the opium of the masses. You just go and pray that may somebody who has eyes see what is going on. My first emphasis will be why literature matters. I'm not trying to advocate that all of you, will transform your lives if you read literature. Nothing of that sort. Initially, even now, I think we are up against a wall of resistance if by choice, as an adolescent, we start talking about, I love literature and I was to take up literature as a profession. The chances are you may be thrown out of your house. That's what you're talking about. If you are not an engineer or a doctor or anything of that sort, and obviously recently, I think maybe 10 years or so, that even legal profession has probably gained importance. So what I'm going to emphasize on is why literature matters. And for this, I will be taking up several parables. The first parable that I would like to share with you is a story, Hindi story written in Hindi. The author is Sudarshan. Many of you in your schools may have read it, but I would like to share the story nevertheless. In this story, there are two main characters. One character is the saint who is known as Baba Bharti. And another character, prominent character, is a dacoit by the name of Jagat Singh. Now these two know each other. And the third character, not in human form, is a horse called Sultan, who belongs to the saint Baba Bharti. Baba Bharti loves his horse, which is exceptionally a kind of a great horse, loves the horse like his own kith and kin and son. Now in this story, what happens? One day, this dacoit learns about the greatness of Sultan, and he says that I'm so powerful, nothing moves in this area without my wish. I must possess this horse. So he goes to Baba Bharti and says that I want to take this horse, I want to buy this horse. And Baba Bharti tells him that I love this horse like my little son, and I can part with anything in the world, but I cannot part with Sultan. He pleads and goes away. One day, this Baba Bharti, riding on Sultan, is going at top speed and enjoying the beauty of nature. Now what happens? While the horse is in motion, he suddenly hears a very pathetic cry. And that pathetic cry tells him that, he finds that beneath a tree, there is a person who is in tatters, very poor and shabby looking, who seems to be absolutely sick and invalid, physically challenged. And he hears the other person say, Baba, रुक जाओ, मुझे 3 मील दूर गांव तक जाना है, मुझे ले चलो, नहीं तो मेरे प्राण यहीं खत्म हो जाएंगे. Baba Bharti gets down from the horse and makes this man sit on the horse. And the moment he sits on the horse, he sees a great jerk. And then he sees that that man whom he had mistaken for a poor, sick person is no one else but Khadak Singh. And when he sees that it is Khadak Singh, he is a little surprised at first. I wish to share a part of that conversation that takes place between the two. So this man, he gets up on the horse and he is about to ride away with the horse. And this he tells, and Khadak Singh is about to move when Baba Bharti says, "Thodi der ke liye ruk jao." This man stops And Khadak Singh says कि मैं ये घोड़ा नहीं दूंगा तुमको, इस घोड़े के अलावा जो भी मांगो तुम्हारा है। इस घोड़े की बात मैं नहीं कर रहा, लेकिन मेरी एक विनती सुनते जाओ। And he thought maybe he has something up his sleeves, and he says, ठीक है कहो। What Baba Bharti tells Khadak Singh is, मेरी प्रार्थना केवल ये है कि इस घटना को किसी के सामने प्रकट ना करना। This man, Khadak Singh, who thinks that he has to run away as fast as he can with the horse, he sees the owner is telling him that instead of his reporting this matter to everyone, he says, don't mention this matter to anyone. And he focuses his full attention on Baba Bharti's face. And he says, Baba ji, इसमें आपको क्या डर है? सुनकर बाबा भारती ने उत्तर दिया, लोगों को यदि इस घटना का पता चले तो वो दीन दुखियों पर विश्वास करना बंद कर देंगे। I'm reading a passage which follows this conversation. बाबा भारती चले गए, परंतु उनके शब्द खड़क सिंह के कानों में उसी प्रकार गूंज रहे थे। सोचता था, कैसे ऊंचे विचार हैं, कैसा पवित्र भाव है। उन्हें इस घोड़े से प्रेम था, इसे देखकर उनका मुंह फूल की तरह खिल जाता था। कहते थे, इसके बिना मैं रह ना सकूंगा। इसकी रखवाली में वो कई रात सोए नहीं, भजन भक्ति ना कर रखवाली करते रहे, परंतु आज उनके मुख पर दुख की रेखा तक दिखाई ना पड़ती। उन्हें केवल ये ख्याल आया, कहीं लोग दीन दुखियों पर विश्वास करना ना छोड़ दें। ऐसा मनुष्य मनुष्य नहीं देखता। This is, I'm not taking you to the end of the story. If you're interested, when you read the story, you will see what a powerful ending it is. This is why literature matters. It changes, it can change the mind of a saint as well as the mind of a decor. The second parable which I wish to share with you while emphasizing the power of literature, I will take you back to almost 2 centuries. The first quarter of the 18th century. I wish to share with you the experience of a slave boy who was named Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass is a name which, even if you Google, you will know that it is a great story of a slave who became free. This Frederick Douglass, when he was an 8-year-old boy, he was with a family of owls, and the wife of the couple, the wife in the couple, encouraged Frederick Douglass to take interest in reading. Douglass began to find a lot of joy in being encouraged by this lady, Sophia, to read. But then one day, he sees that her husband comes in and says that, what the hell are you doing? You're teaching a nigger to read? The moment he reads, he will want to be free and you will lose it. And this wife suddenly realizes that what her husband is saying is right. And then she stops guiding him. But this 8-year-old boy has heard that education, reading can make him free. And from that moment, it becomes a passion with this boy who is seeing brutality all around. And then what he feels that he must write, he must read, he must learn to read and write. And what does he do? He goes out, when he goes out, though he's with a white family, all around, there are a lot of white families around. And when he goes out to meet with the boys of his age, he finds that those boys are all going to school, and mostly they talk about a particular book. They said, "Oh, I read this book today. Oh, this is fantastic." And then he says, so this boy, who's a slave boy, he feels a kind of a desperate attachment to own that book. And you know what he does? For 1 month, he polishes the boots of the white men so that he can save money and buy this book. And because he was working with a family where food was in plenty, so he would carry bread in his pocket, he would carry some eatables in his pocket, he would give to those boys who would probably in exchange tell him something, teach him something. And he begins to own that book. And what I wish you to notice, the title of the book is called The Colombian Orator, written by Caleb Bingham in the year 1870. And you know what he says? In that book, I prefer to be true to myself. Even that slave boy says that he wants to be true to myself, even at the hazard of incurring the ridicule of others, rather than to be false and incur my own abhorrence. From my earliest recollection, I did the entertainment of a deep conviction that slavery would not always be able to hold me within its foul embrace. Another point which I want to share over here, which probably I don't want you to miss this point, that this boy is desperate to read because he has found a goal for himself, and that goal is freedom. And he knows that these words would be the bridge which would take him to the goal of freedom. And then what he does, he looks at, he says that my copybook was the board fence, brick wall, pavement, and my pen and ink was a lump of chalk. When he goes to the Colombian Orator, what attracts him most is that there is a kind of essay where there is a dialogue between a slave master and a slave. This boy reads that and he sees that there is an argument, there is a debate in this kind of an essay where the slave owner tells him that you have run away thrice and I have caught you thrice. Now I want to leave you and all that, and there is a debate. And ultimately, at the end of the debate, the slave owner is convinced that this man deserves his freedom, and he gives him his freedom. So this idea gets into him. And apart from that, I think if you read the autobiography of Frederick Douglass, you will see the kind of the pieces in the Colombian Orator which influenced him. And he was so influenced, and you see what happened. In 1833, Frederick Douglass wins his freedom. But that is not the story, that a slave boy becomes free. He becomes one of the greatest abolitionists in there. And since those days you didn't have those WhatsApp and Facebook circulating, he would run wherever he could, and wherever he saw a gathering, he would get there and he would speak in such eloquent words that people simply, black and white, both of them were transfixed, and they would sit and listen to him. And they would just wonder that, is it true that you could have a genius like him who has just been freed from slavery without a teacher, without a school, without anything for that matter. Literature, as I said, that if you don't have a goal, reading literature can be just reading stories. The third example I wish to share with you is of a great writer whom I had the chance to meet at Seattle during my Fulbright year in the US. And when I was, and I call him a great writer because he's the winner of 2 Pulitzer Prizes. His name is August Wilson. And when I was actually thinking of August Wilson, I have read at many places that he does not grant interview to anyone. He is a kind of a recluse, stays within himself and doesn't probably talk to many people. I told a friend of mine, who's again a very big name in African American literature, Charles Johnson, that is there any possibility that we could, I and my wife could just come and meet August Wilson? And you won't believe, and this is again, the chance does play its role. And it wasn't even a week when I got a call from Charles Johnson, and he said that you'll be happy to know that August Wilson has invited you both to dinner at Capitol Hill today. We went. I had read quite a good deal about him, and then we got into talking. I thought since we were his guests at dinner, I should not start asking him a question in the form of an interview, but I asked him that, August, that you are a great name today. What actually inspired you to come to writing? And August said that I was very fond of reading. I had a library card when I was 4-year-old. And I started going to a library at the age of 6. But then he recounted a story. He said, I was 14-year-old and I was studying in school. We were given an assignment in school where we were asked to write on any character of history who probably influenced the students. He said, I wrote my piece on Napoleon Bonaparte, and after 3 days, we submitted that essay. After reading that essay, because August Wilson is African American, though he looks white, the teacher called him and asked him in front of the whole class, you have to tell me who has written this essay for you. August said, it was my essay. I have cited all the references there, and you can check on anything. You ask me anything, and I will respond to that. And ultimately what happened? The teacher said, if you accept that you have this essay has been written by your sister or anyone else, or for that matter, I'll give you an A grade. But if you refuse to accept, I'll give you a D grade. August said, as a 14-year-old, I was thinking of all the dreams my mother had for me, because his father had left him when he was just 6-year-old. And it was his mother who brought him up. And he said that when I was given the chance to think it over, I simply took the papers from my teacher's hand, tore them up, threw it into the waste paper basket, and walked out of the school. and my education ended when I was just approaching 50, he says. But I knew my mother would be sad because she wanted to see me as a great lawyer fighting for the rights of African Americans. But I couldn't do anything about it. But from that day, for the entire duration of the school that I was supposed to be in, I would go to the Dale Carnegie Public Library and read till the library closed. And where Patiala is concerned, I have a monograph in the University of Patiala on August Wilson, on his piano lesson, and that is there. So August, when I talk of August, and you know what he said, I said, your mother must be feeling very sad that you left the school. He said, yes, for a little while she was sad, but then she got used to that idea. And today, I simply wish my mother would be alive to see that her son, August, has got 24 honorary doctorates from universities all over the US and Europe, including one from Harvard. This is what literature can do. Now, the example that I'm going to give you, probably, according to me, in the context of today's thing, is highly relevant. In Bombay, I'm going back again to 1 century. On the Lamington Road, there is a popular book depot. There was a popular book depot, which was established in 1924. The owner of that book was Ganesh Ramarao Bhatkal. And he would see that a student would come to his shop with great difficulty, take out some annas, that was the currency then, and buy one book and just stand there and stare at the rest of the book. This Ganesh Ramarao Bhatkal saw that this boy somehow had a passion for seeing all those books. And he told him that, come in, you can look at any book you like. And he started looking at the books, and he said that you can go home only when I close the shop, but listen, before closing the shop, I keep a part of the back door open for routine work to go on. You can stay and read whatever you feel like before we finally close. And you know, what happened, the encouragement that he gave to this boy who joined first BA honors in literature and then did his MA in English literature. And you know what this boy states? It was in those years that I read the lines of Wordsworth, which have always been etched in my memory. And there are 3 lines from that poem, Tintinabe, lines written a few miles above Tintinabe, that is the title of the poem. He quotes 3 lines and says, that best portion of a good man's life. That best portion of a good man's life is little, nameless, unremembered acts of kindness and of love. That is the best portion of a good man's life. Little, nameless, unremembered acts of kindness and of love. And you know, this boy, after completing his MA, he wanted to become an English teacher, and normally, when we see that people don't take to the subject very much, but he was so deeply in love with it. He wanted to become an English teacher. He appeared for an interview. There was another lady who was also an applicant, and she said, oh, and the management said, you know, she is elder to you and she has more experience. So I'm sorry, we will not be able to offer the job. He says, okay, it's fine. And then he joins the School of Law in Bombay, and then teaches for some time in Calcutta also. And, you know, you will be amazed to know that this boy had a great physical defect. He used to stammer in his young days, and he used to feel that he will not be able to do anything in life because naturally the speech becomes important. And his reading of literature, his participating in elocution contests, poetry recitation, and he became so involved in it that he overcame all these deficiencies. You would like to know who this boy is. I'm talking about Nani Palkhivala, one of the greatest jurists India has known. And C. Rajagopalachari, who was the first Governor General of India, he said that Palkhivala is God's gift to India. This young boy joins the law profession, and one of the greatest of the cases that come before the Supreme Court, the Keshavanand Bharati case versus the state of Kerala, which decided the fate of the fundamental rights. It is all that we owe today is to Nani Palkhivala. And you know, in one of the speeches that he made by the Ramarao Bhatkal Foundation, he said that had Ganesh Ramarao Bhatkal been alive today, it would have been an honor for me to touch his feet. So that is Palkhivala. What I'm trying to say is that here you have an example. You had another examples, but here is an example of a man who shared through his writings with whatever he learned from his literature. If you read the books written by Nani Palkhivala, you will find that there is hardly any author, any philosopher, right from the Greek to the present time that he was there, that he does not refer to them. And then you see what happens. He was a student of literature, but he joined a profession, and he says that I'm grateful to that lady that is, you know, that because of her, I'm in the profession. And there are judges who said, you know, I'm not going to dwell at length because as a student of RGNUL, I think every one of you must be familiar with the writings that he has had. And what here I wish to say is that reading literature, because if you are saying something, if that cannot attract the audience, and you know what happened? First, he is to give a budget speech. After every budget, he is to give a speech. This budget speech was first held in a hall, then they came out in the lawns, and then he became such a popular orator that finally the venue had to be shifted to Brabourne Stadium because lakhs of people would assemble there to listen to him. This is the difference that literature can make, your passion for literature can make. Now the question comes, what do we do? Do you go to a university, study BA, MA, and then know what literature is to become great in your profession? No, that would be absurd. I'm going to give you what you need to be aware of. You know, in one of the meetings, an astronomer had said that to an astronomer, man is nothing but a small dot in the infinite universe. Einstein, who was present over there, he observed, I've often felt that. But I then realized that the insignificant dot, who is man, is also the astronomer. And you see, he was such a great scientist. But if you read his writings, you will find that they are profoundly influenced by what he did. And he used to say that animals can be trained, but only human beings can be educated. Education requires personal participation and transformation. It cannot be given to anyone. It must be inwardly appropriate. And I'll tell you what is very significant is I just talked about what do you read? Do you go to a library? If you go to a library, leave alone reading many books. If you just choose one author, you will spend your whole lifetime and you will not be able to decipher what you have read. So I'm giving you an example. If you have heard about Shakespeare's play Hamlet, in that play, there is a place where Polonius, and Polonius is known as the fool in Shakespeare. Polonius advises his son before he is leaving for France as to how he should carry out his demeanor, carry out his behavior, what he should do and what he doesn't do. He talks about all those things, neither a borrower nor a lender be and all that. There's just 26 lines. If you read these 26 lines, you will know what selection can mean. How do you reach those 26 lines? It could be a matter of chance. It could be a matter of the generosity of our teachers. Because you know why I hold those 26 lines important today is the world is flooded with millions and millions and millions of books on how to develop your personality, how to succeed in life. You read 400 pages of garbage and you still feel, oh, you know, success to kahin dikh nahi raha. But if you read the 16 lines, the 26 lines, you will realize that in your day-to-day experience, how each line can give you a new meaning to what you are trying to achieve in life. But the basic thing is that instead of now, you see what happens in this internet age, there are two parallel sources running together. One gives you a world of information, which can be qualified as pure garbage. The other gives you a lot of valuable information, but the information is flooded in such a manner that it cannot be possible for you to retain what you have heard. So rather than that, you have to go to a place where you can see what you need. As I told you in the beginning, that each one must take what he or she needs and appropriate that into your behavior. And I'll tell you one example. You will say that I've been talking about stories and I'm talking about Palkhivala and I've been talking about August Wilson and Frederick Douglass. But how am I sort of related to it? You see, I also went through that phase where my English teacher in the school would say that I feel it is very unfortunate that students like you who love literature so much, they don't come to study literature. I said, you know, we have our careers to think about and all that. I remember, and let me tell you, just share this with you, that I have been a student of science who wanted to pursue at the postgraduate level the field of nuclear physics, but my love for literature was so intense. I didn't want to become a teacher, to be very frank. And still, I don't know why I've become a teacher of all things. But the love of the subject that I had, you know, right from when I was in class 4, I used to maintain a diary where any word, any line that looked to be lovely, I would just note down in my own handwriting in the diary. And I wouldn't understand many of those things. But later on, as I grew up, I could see the, you know, what weight those words have. So when you talk about the words and words, you never know which can prove heavy. I remember that for standing first in my class, that must have been 5th or 6th, I was given a book as a prize. And that book was King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. You may have heard or about it, this book or not, but let me tell you one little story in this. It's a great story of the greatness of human beings. And in this story, what, you know, it's something which I read at that point of time, but something which has always kept on reminding me about that part of the story. And, you know, in that, the Round Table, King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, it was a table where 150 knights would sit together. And when this was returned to King Arthur by his father-in-law, to whom it was gifted by his own father, he realized that there was a magic in that table. And that magic was that the knight who sat there, if on a particular chair, in a particular point of the table, if he deserved that chair, his name would figure in golden letters at the back of the chair. And you know what happened? This is a story. There are so many things in that story that attracted me, but it has taught me, no matter how small or big chair we occupy in our professional life, if we must bring credit to that chair by sitting in it, to be worthy of it. And what I feel is that apart from lifelong intellectual curiosity, where you can make books and wisdom of the ages your lifetime companions. Now, when you're choosing how much should I read, if you are aware of a critic called T.S. Eliot, he mentions in Tradition and Individual Talent that those who strive to attain knowledge, they spend their whole lifetime. But Shakespeare gleaned more of wisdom from the lives of Plutarch than anyone else would have done from the entire library of the British Museum. So what you see, what you take, what you adopt, this is where your own goals are important. And apart from that, let me tell you that when you look at the profession of law, even if you don't look at, no matter whether you are a judge, whether you are a lawyer or you're working in an office or in a team or battery of lawyers and whatever that is, it is really not important. What is important is that literature can give you that feeling of eloquence. when you speak, people listen, which is something absolutely great, because today nobody listens to what the others are saying because they know that it's most of the time it's not worth listening. But what I wish to emphasize, it is how you learn when you look at the lives of, you read those great books, and Palkhivala himself has said that don't read about the best books, read the best books. And I'll tell you how reading can change your attitude. I'll just refer to one book, Lady Chatterley's Lover. If you Google, first thing you will know that for pornography and other things, it was banned. I was a student out of college. I had just joined the teaching profession. I was walking down the aisle of the college library, and I saw this book, Lady Chatterley's Lover. And I said, oh, well, this is banned and all that, and it seems to be a kind of from the cover, it appears that it is probably a stuff which is related to pornography. Anyway, I said, and that I normally do. When I open a book, I see the very first few lines, or I just chance upon and open any page of the book and see if there is worth anything listening or taking note of. And I was amazed. And the book begins with, ours is this most essentially a tragic age. So we refuse to take it tragically. A cataclysm has happened. We are among the ruins. We build up new habitats. We scramble or go around. We have got to live no matter how many skies have fallen. And those lines are etched in my memory. And when somebody debates about this, the content of the book, I feel if you are looking for that content, then it could be a work of pornography. But if you are looking at the words, the power of words, the very beginning lines can open a entirely new world to you, can teach you perseverance, can teach you how you can resist. And you see what happens. I'll tell you one small incident. And, in Zambia, Lusaka, there is a zoo. And there's a cage in that zoo where there is a notice where it is written, the world's most dangerous animal. And you know what is there? Which animal? You may not be able to guess. Inside the cage, there is no animal, but a mirror where you see yourself. So this is what probably can make you change things in life. And, something. It is not merely literature, is not something which is found in libraries and only that you have to study BA honors or MA literature. You can pick up any of these things which could motivate you for life. And I wish to share with you, and another point before I refer to this is, what is very significant is that what can change you, nobody else can decide. What can change you is you yourself. But if you can see the dot in the universe, which is a human being, I think your decision has been made. And as I told you, that it could be a piece of anything. It could be a song, it could be a book, it could be a poem, it could be a line in a play. And I remember when I was very young, I was very fond of seeing movies and of all kinds. And I don't remember the name of the film, but I remember the lines where the protagonist says, "Jis taraf dil aur dimag jaye, par atma na jaye, us kaam ko kabhi nahi karna chahiye." Dil, dimag. Even animals have that. But atma, wherever your Atma takes you, heed to that word. And because this is related, basically organized by a law school, I would like to, before I ask Dr. Navleen to switch on the video where I would be sharing a song, I would like to share a statement with you by Palkhivala, which all of you as students of law should know. And he says, the survival of our democracy and the unity and integrity of the nation depend upon the realization that constitutional morality is no less essential than constitutional legality. Constitutional morality and constitutional legality. So just think of that. And he says, Dharma lives in the hearts of public men. When it dies there, no constitution, no law, no amendment can save it. So I wish that someday some of you will achieve the greatness, which according to you will give you a lot of satisfaction and say, yes, this particular, I remember this particular story, this particular line, this particular film, it made so impact upon me that I feel that the dharma that is there in my heart, that has to be protected at all costs. And what it is you to decide. And another thing which I would like to tell you is what difference literature can make. There have been famous trials, Joan of Arc and so on, right from Socrates and all that. You may read those trials. That will be a legal document. But try and read something on which some literary genius has written a novel, a poem, a short story, or anything, and see what difference is there in the perspective and perception. That could help you, whether you are a lawyer or a Chief Justice of Supreme Court someday. And some of the books that you should read is George Bernard Shaw, St. John, Galsworth, The Justice, Upton Sinclair's Boston, which deals with the psychoanalytic case, E.L. Doctorow's The Book of Daniel Rosenberg's Trial, that deals with Joseph Warren, Penn Warren, all the King's Men. Now, with these words, before I request Dr. Navleen to ask the technicians to play the song is by Bob Dylan. It's titled Blowing in the Wind. And this is important because it discusses many of the things that I've been talking about. It is one of my favorite songs. So if you have listened to me for such a long time, you can listen to one of my favorite songs too. And I would like to, before I conclude, I would like to say is that the big brothers who have been watching me, I wish to tell them that I don't want merely a cosmetic representation of remarkings in this August event you have organized. And all the students of RGNUL are welcome to write around 300 or 400 words on words and words. But write whatever you feel like, and the best 10 entries we will consider, and the best 5 entries we will publish in the forthcoming issue of Remarkings. So you see, this is a kind of an invitation. You can take it, and I'll be very happy to see RGNUL and its bright students represented in the pages of Remarkings. And you know why Remarkings is important? Not because your teachers write for that journal, but because the chairman of the Swedish Academy, who decides on the Nobel Prize for Literature, has also been a contributor to Remarkings. Thank you very much. I would welcome the questions, queries, or whatever it is. Obviously, if the big brothers have not been sleeping through this time. Thank you very much, Dr. Navleen, Dr. Tanya, RGNUL, Professor Bajpai, and everyone else. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. We can play the song before I begin with my remarks.
Yeah, sure.
Inderpreet, sir, you can just play the song, please. Thank you so much, sir.
That was a wonderful song. I would now like to invite Dr. Navleen Multani, ma'am, the chair for the session, to deliver some remarks.
Thank you so much, sir, for this wonderful talk, which has invigorated so many thoughts. I really thank you for the incentive that you have given to our students. You know, I don't know how, sir, you knew about that something was going on in my mind, whether we could ever bring our students on the platform of remarkings, but then they have to prove that they are capable of that. Thank you so much, sir, for your invigorating talk and the talk on the epistemological benefits of reading, hearing, listening to very well structured narratives, and that the books have to be our companions for life, and there we should have a willingness to learn. Thank you so much, sir, for enlightening us and our students on the role of education, which has to emancipate our minds. Again, this brings to my mind the words of Martin Buchner, who says that narratives, like Professor Prasannanshu also made a mention, the word, Shabad se utpati hui, right? So narratives from the ancient epics to the modern novels have changed not only the history, but they have influenced the mindsets of the generations. So, and you very pertinently pointed out that a personal participation is something, you know, which is a prerequisite for us to emancipate ourselves from all sorts of shackles, you know, that we have, all kinds of prejudices that we have. Because after all, what are these narratives? You know, they are giving an account of experiences, or let me say it conversely, experiences take a narrative form. So life, you can never, you know, is inseparable from the life that can be told. And a French philosopher, Michel Sartre, has rightly pointed out that we are a recited society. And Professor Ghosh has very well begun his talk by telling us what Auden, the great 20th century poet, said: poetry can make nothing happen. But yes, in doing so, it is also making so many things happen. Why? Because P.B. Shelley is the one who remarked that the poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the word. So sir has very well, you know, taken us to a very nice journey, a journey which began with Auden, with lots of focus on those parables, and the story of how a slave gaining his freedom by simply reading. And what was the most interesting part, I think, which everyone must have appreciated was, though everything is appreciable, sir, August Wilson's and a few of the students, you know, who still have to find a book which they have to work on their project for, can always think of that. And sir has already hinted, they can amply use that secondary resource available in the form of a monogram by Punjab University, which is on August Wilson. So whatever life experiences, at times, you know, young minds do question, why should we listen to the experiences of others? Because it is by listening to the experiences of others, we can bring some kind of changes in our lives. And also, it is a way in which, you know, we can interpret or reinterpret life. The way it is told or retold is highly going to shape our reasoning, which is the kind of torch that sir was referring to when Einstein, you know, was rightly picking up those words, that man is a small torch in this infinite universe. So the light is within. We just need to spark that, so that whether it's the reading of Wordsworth, Nani Palkhivala, any writer, whether it's Mahatma Gandhi's writing. So everywhere you find something or the other which leaves a mark on your life. And really, sir, appreciate your the one part that you shared about writing of the diary, and making a special mention of that banned censored novel, right? Because this is something I think many of the students who are into writing or are mesmerized by words, you know, they usually have those diaries and they keep jotting down, and it really brings down some memories of our school days as well, you know, when we were noting all these things down. And today our students also had to write something, and they will be writing. Rather, there was something, so while you were presenting your views, someone in the chat box just wrote that, are we to write on everything, ma'am? So it's up to you, whatever, you know, whatever you have been able to grasp properly, whatever you have been able to learn. I think it has been a great learning experience, sir. Thank you so much for your words. And I really want to say that humanities is a great gateway with which, you know, you can develop your understanding of law. And sir's discourse on literature and why literature matters for the students of law, the interdisciplinary study. Again, if you say that this particular book is going to give you a solution to some legal problem, is something, you know, which is not intended by this symposium. What we try, the teachers in the Department of English, we are trying to evoke your thoughts, build your understanding, your cognitive skills, so that you can assess, make use of it, and then you can, you know, write in a better manner. No doubt, you know, so very rightly pointed out that if you are a good reader and you have assimilated all that literature in yourself, certain words that are etched in your memory, you know, are going to surface whenever you are speaking, and that is going to be your hallmark as a good speaker. And as lawyers, you are going to be the wordsmiths. I always keep telling my students, and no doubt the writers, the novelists are also wordsmiths. So you have that commonality. There's a common thing that you share. And again, what to say of the song? I think it is evergreen, and I think it leaves us with so much thoughts more to ponder upon. And I really sir, appreciate, and I'm thankful to you for having invited those paragraphs from our students. Actually, they actually have to write a paragraph and submit, right? And so that this was, they can build upon it, improve it, maybe they'll get scrutinized, and finally a submission to remarkings can be made. And I wish my students also good luck. They can make use of this opportunity. They were looking for a platform to get published. Thank you so much, sir. I am really grateful to you for collaborating and having presented your views. Thank you so much. Over to you, Namah.
Thank you so much, ma'am. If now the floor is open for questions, if anyone has a question, please raise your hand. The registered participants will also find a feedback form in the chat box now. And please raise your hand if you have a question. I see there is one raised hand. Please unmute yourself now and you can ask your questions.
Hi, good afternoon. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Good afternoon, sir. Thank you so much for your wonderful session. You have provided some really wonderful insights that did pique my interest. So my name is Aditi Sadhu and I am from first year. So you mentioned a statement posed by Mr. Palkhivala about constitutional legality and how it should go hand in hand with morality. Now, from what I have seen most of the times, this often becomes a point of tussle between legality and morality, which is mostly our social fabric. So in terms when we talk about issues such as LGBTQ rights or even privacy being granted to live-in relationships. So do you think that law schools nowadays provide a focus on this intersection between legality and morality? And will we be able to learn how to approach such cases when there is a tussle between the two?
It's an important question. But morality and legality is something which is does not need any explanation. What is written in the word of law But when you're making a decision as a judge, I think the morality part is important because, you are trying to anticipate something which is not written. You cannot avail that. What you have to at that point dwell upon is the spirit of the law and the spirit of the law. I'll give you an example. When I said in, the complexity of judicial jurisprudence and other things, the complexity is that then no matter what you decide, one party is going to be dissatisfied. To that party, it will be injustice. And one party who will win will be justice, even if they don't deserve to win. But morality is something where you have to, what we have been talking about, all this, Bob Dylan and all that, you can't turn your head permanently and say, I'm not pretending, I'm pretending that I cannot see anything. And I'll give you an example. When Nani Palkhivala was asked to contest the judgment of the central government, nobody would have dared to go against the government of Indira Gandhi at that stage. But you know what happened? He was first appointed. He was supposed to represent the Prime Minister. But then he questioned himself and he deliberated quite a bit. And on the second day, he returned the briefs to the Prime Minister's office. And he said that I will fight for the rights of common man, because if you demolish, if you make it just these, if you read Palkhiwala's, you will find that he just he's not scared. He's very humble. He's very polite, but he's not scared. He's very firm. He says that I must defend the fundamental rights of the common man. And he returns a brief. And, people from Australia, from Germany, from different parts of Europe, America, they had come to see, and Supreme Court used to be very packed when he would forward his arguments. So when you think of the morality part, this morality is, if your duty as a lawyer or a judge is mainly to attend kind of, do your job and earn your salary and sort of say that, okay, I've done my job, that is over. No, it's not there. Your duty is your responsibility. First, you are a human being, even if you are a dot in the universe. So what morality is not something written. Morality is come from inside. But what comes from inside of your soul, it will only strike a chord when it applies without knowing or knowing that, there are millions who are thinking of this. People used to flock to in lakhs to attend us, not because he was talking about the budget, but because he was talking in such eloquence about the common man that you could feel that he was literally touched by the grief of the common man. And one of the great things about Palkhivala is not that he has written and he was a great lawyer and all that, but he was a great human being. There are thousands of incidents which will confirm that. So when you talk about the morality part, morality is something which you have to decide, but it must be for the good of all. You cannot say, मेरे दिल ने ये कहा और मैंने दिल की बात मान ली. मैं दिल की बात नहीं कह रहा हूँ, आत्मा की बात कर रहा हूँ. आपकी आत्मा वही कहेगी जिसको, why Shakespeare is supposed to be great, because what Shakespeare says, it applies to you, it applies to me, it applies to anyone who's reading him. And he can identify. So morality is something which cannot be written, but morality is something which if you are sort of making, if you're a judge or a lawyer and all that, if you say that, morality would mean that जो ठीक हमें लगता है वही केस हम लेंगे. Who are you to decide ठीक क्या लगता है? There the legality is important. But if you are wherever there is a stage, I'm not talking about day-to-day going on in the court, because whatever I've seen with my own eyes inside the court, I don't want to share with you all that, because it is reprehensible, absolutely. But morality, if it is there, you will not be able to see things which are done in the open. Otherwise, what happens? And I'll tell you what I expect the students of law colleges, when they go as advocates and all that, they may fight the case on behalf of the criminal or the accused. I won't say criminal, the accused or the defendant, or whatever point you are. But today, you think Supreme Court gives you all this. Ek PIL डाल दो, postcard में भी Chief Justice सुन लेता है. But if you actually go to Supreme Court, you will need to sell yourself 20 times before one advocate says कि हाँ मैं केस ले लूंगा लेकिन 6 लाख रुपए मेरे एक प्रेजेंस के होंगे और 2 लाख मेरे उसके जूनियर के होंगे. So if you are talking about morality, I don't say what you do with legal jurisprudence and what the law has taught you, but at least you can say that justice must be accessible. ठीक है, कोई नहीं कर रहा, मैं इसको free करूँगा. And Palkhivala is a big example in this. He banned still. He was one of the very richest of advocates. But you know what happens? जहाँ Supreme Court का Chief Justice ये बोलेगा, अरे ये तो उसका minister है. कल इनकी सरकार होगी, मेरे को गवर्नर बना दिया जाएगा. So that is where morality is coming into question. It is not coming in, it is not interfering in that case. This is my view, and I told you that it is a parable, basically. You can take it whatever way. But I appreciate a question. That's a very important kind of a question.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Vishal, are you there? You had a question. Vishal? He actually, sir, is exploring the relationship between literature and law and has not been able to find much. So he just wanted, I think, after having listened to the discourse that's delivered, I think most of his questions got answered. Just in case, Vishal, you are there, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Dr. Navleen, when it comes to question, I feel like saying like Matthew Arnold about Shakespeare, that others abide your question, I'm free.
Right, sir. Thank
So
you.
when I'm normally talking, I try my best to anticipate. Yeah.
Actually, sir, I think most of queries that students had probably have been answered in the course of time.
I don't have a question, but it's just an observation, primarily for the participants and the students. I feel that where else, like if you start talking about books, the kind of space it offers, look at the spectrum of what we've covered. Forensic linguistics in the morning to Bob Dylan's song in the afternoon. I mean, where else would you find this kind of space? Only when you are talking about books, stories, narratives, words and words. I think it's been such a beautiful journey from morning to afternoon. Thank you so much, Professor Ghosh.
Thanks a lot.
Yes, thank you so much, sir. Professor Prasannanshu is also here with us, sir. Could we have a few of your observations? Thank you so much.
I think the crown should go to the audience because they have been so active, proactive, and innovative with their questions. So it was an overall enjoyable day for me. Thank you.
It was a privilege to see your presence here, and I deeply appreciate that.
Thank you so much, sir. Namah, I think we are done with the almost. I think sir has not left any. Yes, sir.
Dr. Navleen, may I just take a minute?
Yes, sir. Sure, sir.
Only about the students' participation, where it is concerned, the writing part I said. I mean, the emphasis should be on what the person individually feels about it. It should not be about quoting too much or internet sources or something. What you as an feel, and it can be less. It could be, you need not have to write all those 300-400 words. It can be shorter than that. But whatever you write, you feel that, okay, as a lawyer or a justice or anything. I think I saw a question where somebody probably in some chat has mentioned that, the spirit of the law and the letter of the law, there has always been that. Why? Because what Gandhi said, there are lawyers who want that these disputes should go on. Because, see, I've talked about all the great things that you find in literature. But, if you've seen Sholay, Ghoda ghas se yari karega to khayega kya? So, it is that logic. But if you are, your conscience is there, if you want to do what the Bob Dylan song says, and you're saying they're blowing in the wind, hamare liye nahi hai, to jisko mil jaye utha le usko. It's not that. If it touches you, you will ensure that with your intelligence, with your eloquence, with your background as an honest and person of integrity, you will make sure that the distance between, I don't say it's going to vanish, but you can always reduce the distance between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. And I'm sure, I don't know, it is just an instinct that of all the participants who are there would someday probably vindicate what I'm expecting today. And if it doesn't happen, that doesn't matter, because it was a parable. You were supposed to take whatever you feel like it. Thank you once again, especially Prasannanshu, for your presence. I'm really honored, and maybe we could discuss all these things in on some other time or some other issue. And when Remarkings is published, so I'll make sure that you get to see what it is. Thank you once again. Thanks a lot. All the participants, the technicians, Dr. Navleen, Dr. Tanya. It was wonderful being with you. Thank you.
I would like to thank everyone for joining the session today. Thank you so much for everyone.
Thank you so much for everyone. Before we leave, there's just one thing that I would like to put as part of record. I think all the students should really be grateful and obliged to Dr. Multani. She's a very driven individual of the department, and it was completely her idea. And I really appreciate the effort, ma'am. I'm so glad it could take the shape how you had imagined it, and we've been able to complete it with success. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much,
Dr.
Tanya. I think this would not have been possible had we not coordinated, discussed certain things, all the kind of difficulties that we were facing, and we are grateful to our Vice Chancellor, because he is the one who has moved us and motivated us. And yes, it would not have been possible without your support, sir, Professor Nibir Ghosh, Professor Prasannanshu, their readiness to address our students. This time actually we have opened it only to our students, with a few guests who had requested. We allowed them, and they are also attending the symposium today. And in fact, the next one that we have on 9th of October, we plan to open it for all. So already the flyer is there on the website. It has been shared on the social sites also. I think I shared it with Professor Prasannanshu, and I will be sharing with Professor Prasannanshu and Nibir Ghosh as well. We'll have the Justice Officer from Judicial Officer from Sri Lanka, Chanima Wijebandara, for this. So this was, sir, a long cherished dream. Both the teachers' English department had been dreaming that one day language, law and literature, but again, this would not have been possible without your consent, having accepted our invitation. And yes, the willingness of our participants who get a bonus today, that they get an opportunity to publish. The trio Namah, Pranit and Raghav. It would not have been possible, you know, when they had some questions. We have never met, sir. We have not met because of the COVID online classes. So this was all happening online, and we managed everything whatsoever with the great support of IT, Mr. Inderpreet and Mr. Kuldeep. We could connect with Pranit one day for the practice session, things like that. And then I really had to tell them, dear students, the trio had to arrive on the scene for this thing to happen. So thank you so much, everyone. Participants, thank you for your patience, your time, and I hope you've been noting down, you were listening, and sir has made himself very clear that you need to express your own self in your own words, right? When you're sending that to, yes, definitely sir will share the mail that will be forwarded to you wherever you have to send your entries. It will be scrutinized by the remarkings board for publication. And I think IT, can we have Mr. Inderpreet and Mr. Kuldeep also on the scene, please, because we want to thank you that this has been possible because of you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thanks from my side too.
Oh yes, sir. They really worked on that song. We had to play it.
On account of this technicalities, you know, sometimes the real problems can arise, and it was absolutely smooth.
Thank you, sir.
So thank you so much, everyone. I again thank you on behalf of the Department of English. Wish you all good luck. And we are really honored, sir, to host you, Professor Prasannanshu and Professor Nibir Ghosh. Thank you so much. And thank you, Ma'am Chanima has joined us. Ma'am, would you like to share your views? Please go ahead.
It was a very inspirational session, and I'm really happy to have participated. And Professor Navleen, I'm really grateful to you for this kind invitation and making me a part of this amazing symposium. And I'm looking forward to meet you all again in the next session in October. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chanima ma'am, for having joined us. You made our day. And we look forward to your discourse on the purple patches in judgments on 9th of October. So it's an invite to everyone, sir, Professor Nibir Ghosh and Professor Prasannanshu, that she will be here with us on 9th of October for another session, which is law and literature, the literary citations in judgments. Thank you so much. We sign off for today, but Nama, Pranit and Raghav and IT, we can have one more picture with you also in the frame, please, sir. Right? You are the men behind the show. So we want you to be in that picture. We can take pictures and then we can say a bye. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
But just one minute. Okay, done.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.